and especially the aspect of meditation. I think that was enough as far as meditation is concerned. The main explanation being about why we have to meditate for 1 hour and why it has to be regular. The second thing concerns the cleaning, and I have already, I think, touched upon it in the talk yesterday morning, because as I had tried to explain to you, we come into this world with our load of samskaras, which is our own creation, and that is the capital we bring into this existence. It continues to guide our lives totally, though we enjoy a spurious or false sense of freedom. Spurious can also be taken as an imitation, you see. Like you have a Sony recorder, if somebody makes another one and puts the Sony label, it is spurious. So, whatever we may think about our own freedom, we are not really free. And we can be free only when our samskaras are erased, which is achieved by the cleaning process. My master once clarified the utmost importance of not continuing to form samskaras. It would have been a very easy thing that we bring some samskaras into this existence and they are removed off by a graceful master. But every time we think something or do something, there is the possibility of creating another impression and a samskara. Therefore, spiritual success or success in the spiritual life does not depend only on the meditation and on the cleaning. Because if you are going to add on samskaras day by day, the cleaning process becomes endless, and therefore the meditation cannot be really effective. And the third and most important consideration is that the master has to regulate his own transmission, because as you all know, the transmission will only exaggerate existing tendencies. Therefore, in that sense, purity is essential before we can make the best use of the transmission that we receive. Now, during our seminars last year, in 1985, considerable emphasis was given to the thought on morality. At that time, we had spoken about morality in a different way, as something by which we guide our conduct in this existence. Now, why should it be guided like that? Because people are always prone to ask, if I am happy now, why should I change? In fact, I remember first time in 1971, one prospective Abhyasi asked a question. She was a very prosperous European, a good life in every sense. And she was really unable to understand why a human being should seek to change one's existence or mode of existence. Because in her opinion, her life couldn't be bettered. So she said, why should I change? Why should I look for a better life than this? The answer was that you are asking from a situation in which you are now placed. That is from a position of prosperity, affluence, comfort, good health. But imagine what it would be like were your circumstances different. She asked, why should I think about that? But when she thought for herself that probably less than 1% of humanity has such a good life, and that the next life she could be born differently, say, depending on the circumstances or environment that she is building for herself in the future by her thoughts and actions in this life. Then she understood the wisdom of planning for the future. Because spirituality is in every sense planning for the future. It cannot be otherwise. Our past has been fixed and done with. Our present is what it is because of the past. But it offers a fantastic opportunity in which we can plan for the future. No businessman will plan next year for next year's business. He plans today. In fact, under modern business practice, we plan not for the next year, but for at least next 5 years, to the very smallest possible details. Product, planning, market strategy, finance, cash flows, everything. And modern business practice is nothing but epitomizing this planning process. To which businessman is last year's profit useful or interesting? It's finished. So the future is what we are all thinking about and planning for. And the planning involves 2 or 3 processes. Reviewing past performance, not out of any guilt complex or guilty feelings, but to see how our performance could be improved and how the mistakes of the past could be avoided. This is what we do in spirituality. The master says you lived like this and this and this, therefore you have such and such samskaras, and therefore you are what you are now. Now avoid all these things. He puts it in different terms. He says repent for the mistakes you have committed. But as Babuji pointed out, and as it is very important to understand, repentance in Sahaj Marg is not something like flagellation or lashing ourselves with thoughts of sin. Repentance means making a resolution not to repeat our mistakes. So the idea of sin, which is so obnoxious to human beings, and the fear of punishment that always accompanies a sense of guilt are both avoided by the single positive action of deciding the past is dead, but I resolve not to repeat those mistakes again. Incidentally, I may suggest if the businessmen made a similar resolution, they would be far more successful too. Because if you consider the phenomenon of flight, it is gravity which holds us down. If you could just cut off gravity, even mountains could fly. What is so wonderful about flight? Similarly, it is the weight of our past which is holding us down. And I may say with absolute confidence that the cleaning aspect of Sahaj Marg alone is sufficient to give us most of the blessings of spiritual practice. Because 90% of our deficiencies, of our drawbacks, of the gravitational hold of samskara is released in one stroke. And this I consider is something unique to Sahaj Marg. Because though the idea of cleaning is not foreign to even religious systems, it has remained a superficial approach to physical cleansing and perhaps to psychic cleaning process. To my knowledge, nothing more than that, nothing deeper than that. And therefore, all temple rituals, church rituals, they have remained merely that, rituals. And that is why when we go there and come out, we don't feel a sense of either elation or lightness or joy, which almost without exception every abhyasi feels after a cleaning process. I hope you have all experienced this. So that is the fantastic difference between spiritual cleaning process as given by my master. This buoyancy, this feeling of lightness. And that is why, in a sense, Babuji says, we don't see light, but we feel light, which is the first thing abhyasis feel. We don't see light, but we feel light. And how does this feeling of lightness come? Precisely because the weight of samskaras is removed. I therefore repeat that it achieves 90% of what we have to achieve under spiritual practice. And whenever we meet abhyasis anywhere in the world and we find that they are not progressing, almost invariably it is because they have not done the cleaning. Now Babuji Maharaj has said that if you receive transmission while your tendencies are still active, only those tendencies will be strengthened. As he put it very pithily, if you transmit to a thief, he will become a perfect thief. That is why I have always felt that transmission without cleaning cannot achieve much. Or at least it cannot achieve much in the direction that we want it to achieve. Therefore, I have always emphasized that the fundamental requirement, the most important requirement of our sadhana is the cleaning process. Therefore, we also advise abhyasis, whenever you cannot meditate, at least do the cleaning in the evening, because at least it keeps the vessel pure to receive the transmission. So this is the very great benefit of the cleaning process, and whatever else we may neglect, cleaning should not be neglected under any circumstances. Then we come to the prayer at bedtime. It is an important element because by practicing that aspect of our Sahaj Marg practice, by which we repeat the prayer a few times mentally and then meditate on the meaning of the prayer, we find the prayer assuming or revealing to us different aspects of its meaning. It is not what it seems to read and say. Very often beginners ask the question, you say, "Oh Master, who is this guy?" Who is the Master? Because Babuji writes in Reality at Dawn, in Voice Real, God alone is the real Master. Then you say, he is my Master, Babuji is my Master. You also say, he had his Master, Lalaji. For heaven's sake, will you clear this confusion? Now, the easiest way of finding out what and who is the Master is this meditation on the prayer at night. It is not without purpose that it has been given to us as one aspect of our practice, that it connects our consciousness with the next morning through the facet of sleep is okay. It's one of the aspects. That we go to bed in a divine consciousness is another aspect. It helps us to have a relaxed sleep, a dream-free sleep, in fact, real sleep. But is that all? I used to think so too, until the meditation on the prayer revealed itself in many ways. See, in India we use, analogy. In the old days, that is 50 years ago, it was the practice for a boy of 10 or 8 to marry a girl of 3 or 4. That was the practice in our society. It was a game. You see, it was as if a boy and a girl, not yet 10 years old, were playing at marriage. And many people have criticized this, condemned this practice as not only unlawful but inhuman. I also used to think so. But many years later, when we see people of 30 and 40 marrying, we find the differences that surface. Because in child marriage, the biggest benefit is that the two grow together from the time they are children. It begins almost like play, but ends with a profound mutual respect and mutual love, which I can say with fairly good confidence is rare to find in modern marriages anywhere. It was precisely because they grew into it from the time they were innocent children. They could understand each other, appreciate each other, tolerate each other. And when they grew up sufficiently to know what love is, they sort of fell into love on a substantial foundation of togetherness built up over the previous 10, 12, 15 years. So it had its merits. Now, what is the parallel with spirituality? Here also we have a man who claims he is in contact with the ultimate. And he says, by virtue of that contact which I have achieved, I have the ability to put you in contact with that same ultimate. So trust me to a little extent and start this. So for almost all of us, the spiritual journey with our master begins as an association with a mere human being. That's all we see of him in the beginning. A man from India, not very well educated, not very well cultured according to our European standards, with outlandish dress habits and food habits, funny mannerisms, but with all endearing. That is how Babuji came to Europe first. A very strange person. He had totally no idea of what Europe is. For that matter, he didn't know what even Bombay is. But look at the fantastic value of his presence here. That when he came first in 1972, there were perhaps 11 Abhyasis or 12 Abhyasis in the whole of Europe. And today he is the darling of Europe. Not only among the Abhyasis, but among many who are still on the peripheral fringes, thinking whether they should enter or not. Because it is a fact that whoever came into contact with him, whether they had accepted his practice or not, whether they had accepted his message or not, whether they were prepared to enter his spiritual method at all or not, none of them could avoid respecting him and loving him. Now, what was it that he had? No education, no wealth, no presence, as we call it. He was not something like one of these big actors. A very simple, unassuming, shy, timid person. And with all these, what we think of as negative attributes, because in Europe, we want tall, broad-shouldered, aggressive, go-getters. But this man had none of this. He had all the opposite virtues. Yet he captured the hearts of everybody here. You see, this is the mysterious adventure into which we enter. That if we make the right decision in the beginning and accept him without judging him, with all his so-called defects as they appear to us, like the girl bride of 4 years accepts a boy bridegroom of 8 years, innocently, knowing nothing what it is, but with faith in the future. Then we understand and we observe this miraculous unfolding of the future, where that man whom we associated with progressively becomes more and more lovable, more and more adorable, until a day comes when we cannot exist without him. It's no longer a question of spirituality. It's no longer a question of what he can give us, of central region, of all this nonsense. He has become a vital part of our existence. And this is not the only miracle. We find that we are also growing into that very same thing that he is, by losing all our foolishness, all our false attractiveness, false beauties. We learn to come into tune with nature, and we find the miracle that after a few years of practice, we are no longer mannequins in glass cases, but we are living human beings. So this is the transformation. From dolls, of course, walking, loving, laughing, screaming dolls, we become very natural, lovable human beings again. And I have seen visible proof of this between 1972 and 1986. Of course, in 1972, when Master came first to Europe, there were couples everywhere. But if you will pardon my saying it, they were just couples. In all the wrong possible ways. Only a casual, opportunism linked them. Many of the couples are still together today. But as Babuji used to say, those who have eyes can see that they are different today. There is humanity between them, there is love between them, there is respect between them, there is tolerance between them. And if you don't mind my mentioning another fact, many of them are married also. I mean, it's not a laughing matter, you see. Because as I explained in another talk, many of you may think marriage is just a piece of paper, but it shows a commitment to each other's welfare, a commitment to respect each other, and a commitment to love each other. not only for a day or a week or even a year, but as we used to read in children's stories, forever and ever after. This is the miraculous transformation that my master has worked in our society here in Europe. It is not a small thing because society has tried this, moral institutions have tried it, legal institutions have tried it, the churches preaching fire and brimstone and pitch, they have tried it. They didn't succeed. But I repeat, here came a fellow from Shahjahanpur, stranger, totally unknown to us, and in a brief decade transformed so many people, not only by giving them spiritual benefit, which of course he could give without even coming here, but what is more important and more immediately needed for us as human beings, brought back love and confidence into our lives. Because without that, we could not proceed further for spirituality. So this is the greatest achievement I think that he had. And if anything transcends his achievement, it is our own achievement. That we were able to trust a man whom we have never seen before and in whom there was nothing which could make us trust him. So if ever people ask which is the greater of the two, the master or the disciple, I would not hesitate to answer it is the disciple. And it is not my answer, it is not original, because master himself has said it is easy to find a master but extraordinarily difficult to find a disciple. When I studied how all this became possible, it was my rather humiliating discovery that it was not the practice, it was not the teaching that developed us to this extent, but it was the master as a person who stood before us, not only with humility and with a self-sacrificing attitude, but something that impressed us fantastically. I don't know if any of you realize what it is. It was his absolute confidence in his master. You know, when he came in 1972, he was already 73 years old. He knew nothing in India. If you took him away 1 mile or 1 kilometer from his house, he wouldn't know how to get back. It's literally, I'm saying it. He did not know what is a telephone. He did not know where a plane is, where you climb into it, how you get out of it. He had no conception of money. And all these formalities of passports, visas, foreign travel, it was all, not only just foreign. It is as if it is something from Mars or Venus imported here. And look at his enormous courage and faith in the master, his master, that not only was he able to come out on a foreign journey for which he was totally unprepared from every aspect, but he could even bring out a fellow like me with him to help him. I mean, this is not any false humility. You see, I know what I was. And in fact, before I left Delhi, I was worried what I would do if he fell sick. It was a real problem for me. Because we had no contacts in Europe. As I told you, we had half a dozen or 10 Abhyasis, and on that first tour I had to do everything for him. And if he had fallen sick, I would have been in a mess. But as if to reassure me, 24 hours before we left Delhi, he introduced a thought into my head. And the thought was, suppose I fall sick in Europe, what will he do? You see, that changed my whole attitude to my association with the master. Because while I was afraid of his falling sick, of his losing himself, losing his passport, his utter and total faith in his master ensured that he had not only no fears for himself, but no fears about me too. As far as I am concerned, that is what it impressed me most. I did not think much of him in other ways, you see. It is not a matter for disrespect. I don't intend disrespect when I say this. He had enormously human qualities, love, generosity, humor and wit, an inflexible loyalty to the Abhyasis that he accepted. But to me, all this was as nothing. The paramount feature of his character was his absolute total faith in his master. It was the bedrock of his existence. Why I say this is because in some way I tried to convert my own character into a similar faith in him. I must confess that it was not a great success. Because looking at it very analytically, he had great benefits which I will never have. And don't laugh when I say it. He was weak, I am strong. And it is not easy to create dependence on somebody when you think you are strong. He had very little education, I had good education by Indian standards. That breeds even more self-dependence and arrogance. In every way, when I compare myself with him, all these apparent benefits as a human being were really defects. Because it was his weak health, his failing health, his comparative poverty, his comparatively little education, these made faith not only inevitable, but possible. And that brings me to one of the big teachings of the master. He once described three necessities for one to be a saint. He said no person can be a saint unless he is little below par in health, has less than what he needs, and must have permanently people to criticize him, revile him. Yes, it was a difficult thing to accept because all our life we are oriented towards better health, earning more than we need, and how to be friendly with everybody and have everybody as our friends. His teaching was totally against all these things. How to accept this? Because not only does our intellect and our emotion rebel against this, but in some way it seems to be a decadent philosophy. Then when I watched Master through a period of about 10 to 12 years, it came to me, it was revealed to me that each of these three things has a specific purpose in our development and our growth. His frequent ill health made the Abhyasis more concerned for his welfare and health and developed love in their hearts for him. I dare say had he been 6 foot tall and 190 kilos, nobody would have loved him. His weakness, his frailty evoked love from us. Similarly, his lack of material things, material needs, opened our hearts to him even more. Everybody went to him with pullovers, shoes, caps, what have you. It opened our generosity. And we wanted to build his ashram for him, gave him generously of money. And when people criticized him, we became very protective of him. You know how protective a mother becomes when her child is criticized by somebody else? She is like a tigress. The same was with us. You say, how dare you talk about my master like this? So it was a revelation to me to find that a divine master who could have been a master in every sense, physical, emotional, material, he could have been a king of kings, yet chose voluntarily to accept a form and a circumstance and an environment with all the physical and other suffering that he had to undergo, with one sole purpose: make Abhyasis hearts capable of love, capable of charity, capable of surrender. I think in the final analysis, this was his greatest sacrifice, and because of that, it was his greatest achievement. To that, we owe such progress as we are able to make. So I would like to close this rather lengthy discourse on the Master with an effort to recall to you his single requirement, spirituality, a fundamental requirement. Throw away all unnecessary things, whether it be material things, habits, mental things. Be simple and in tune with nature and cultivate the qualities that he cultivated and showed us. Because as he once told me himself, from yet another example in his life, he never meditated for more than 2 or 3 minutes at a time. He also told me that he rarely did the cleaning, and he was often troubled in his conscience that he was not able to do these things. But he said one day when he was going to brush his teeth, he was walking to the well in his house, a matter of 5 meters. His heart was breaking with an anguish to be like his master. And the thought came into his mind, I must be like my master. It was not just a thought, it was an anguished cry from his heart by all his tremendous, profound love for his master. And then Lalaji's voice came, you are like me now. So, in the next final analysis, it is not the practice, it is not meditation, it is not cleaning. Of course, they are all necessary. It is not they which give us the final success. They may give us petty things like liberation, childish things. But if you want that which he got, we must create in ourselves that hunger, that longing, that absolute need to love him in such a way that we want to become like him. That alone can lead to that success. I pray to our Master that he may bless all of us with such success.